Hello, everyone, and welcome to the November 4th episode of the LGS Pod, the Soccer Shorts companion podcast where we highlight topics that affect local grassroots soccer culture here in our hometown of San Diego, as well as across the US and around the world. I'm John Cross, founder of Soccer Shorts, and with me tonight, as always, is our co-host Dylan Wilson. Dylan, how are you doing on this election night?
I'm doing pretty well. I don't know. I've tried not to pay too much attention, especially because it's like an off year election. Like there's really not much. I mean, if not for Prop 50, there wouldn't even be anything here in California. So yeah, I don't know. It hasn't riled me the way previous election days have, but um, so far so good. It seems like
Did you have anything on your ballot besides Prop 50? Because I know
I
there were
didn't know.
some locales that
Oh,
had
okay,
something. Yeah,
no,
I
I
I
didn't.
didn't either. I just had Prop 50 on there. Yeah. Well, before we kind of give a quick preview of tonight's episode, I didn't want to forget to mention to you there's a podcast that I listen to called Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast is the name of it. And they've been going for quite a while. And the person who does the podcast a lot of times interviews people who write books. So for the two of us who like history, I just wanted to let you know on a fairly recent episode. I just heard it between, our last show and this show because I listen to my podcasts in batches. I kind of
Sure.
hit several episodes in one, whichever one I feel like, during the day. So I went through several of their episodes, and one of them was about an author who's done several books specifically about Tottenham. So I just
Oh,
wanted to
nice.
get that
Yeah.
out to you. You might want to check it out. The most recent one is episode 218 of that. I think the name of the book was
Okay.
Hot Shot, and it's about the Tottenham teams from the mid. I don't remember
How
if it
many
was the
there?
mid 80s or the
Oh yeah.
70s. He's done two books of the decades. So, but anyway, thought you might be
Both
interested
both
in
decades
that. And
Spurs won a UEFA Cup mid-decade, so maybe we'll get a book about the 2020s as well.
yeah, there you go. But again, for anybody else who's out there, like, I just referenced that was podcast 218. Um, does a lot with individuals about key historic events or people who've written books about teams or leagues or events. So anybody's interested in some soccer history, that's a good podcast to go check out. Okay, let's get into our, I guess, preview for tonight's episode. So last week, and that's the royal we, I presented kind of a reimagining of the USL ecosystem. And we did a big, broad overview and the reasons why to maybe think out of the box and look at it a little differently. And we didn't quite cover everything that we need to cover, which we didn't think we'd be able to squeeze it all in last episode. So we will be wrapping that up tonight in what will now be part 8 of our Pro-Rel series. And we'll look a little more deeply in this reimagined USL ecosystem, what one of these individual or independent regional pyramids could look like, and then how USL could move in that direction. However, as we will talk about a little later on the episode, if anybody who's watching live or once this gets out on the regular podcast feeds and people listen to it, have been paying attention to any of the USL news, especially over the last 48 hours, there is a lot going on. And we'll get into all of that along with some US Open Cup news and some San Diego news. But to kick it off, we're going to start with a new segment that we're going to call, I'd like to call it This Day in San Diego Soccer History. I think for the beginning, we'll just call it This Day in Soccer History. We'll try to prioritize San Diego events so we can highlight those. Maybe we'll broaden out to Southern California or California and try to keep the focus there. And if not, just American soccer. But we'll do a quick little segment to highlight something in our soccer history. And fortunately, today we do have a San Diego specific event. So let me get that. Sorry, I got to slide my notes over so I make sure I get this right. So, on this date, November 4th, in 1928, the Gas Company 11s, which was a brand new team to the San Diego Soccer League, rallied with 2 late goals to secure a draw with the Vikings, which were a team of Swedish Americans, in the opening match of the San Diego Soccer League season at Balboa, or what we refer to now as Balboa Stadium, which during that time period, a lot of time they just referred to that as City Stadium. But this was just about a decade after Balboa Stadium was built over there. So a little dip into our San Diego soccer history, and we'll dive into those seasons and what happened in our next installment, our big installment where we do San Diego soccer history. So, any thoughts there, Dylan, on that, on the new segment, on what we had for today?
Just a bummer that that didn't really materialize into a modern like local league. I guess it's really always my
Yeah, I
first
think
thought.
there's so many communities in our country that could say that exact same
Yeah,
thing.
and unfortunately,
Yeah, I want to give a big shout out to Puma, one of our regular listeners, and has given a lot of feedback on the show. And he, well, I would say in general, we probably get more feedback than anything about the soccer history stuff that we do, specifically San Diego soccer history, and people wanting more of it. So this is going to be a way each episode we could just, we'll try to highlight something that happened on that particular day. And again, hopefully we can find things that are specific to San Diego. But I agree with you, and I'm looking forward to this next episode where, we've done several episodes on San Diego soccer history. We got up to about the mid 1920s, and there was a big gap there after World War One, for soccer, and then soccer does come back, which is in this time period, and that will be the focus of our next episode. We'll dive into that a little deeper and talk about what happened there in the mid to late 20s in terms of San Diego soccer before things get interrupted again with another world war. But again, that's pretty much consistent across our country for the development of soccer.
well, and I think something too that makes that particular segment interesting is that, as far as I'm aware, this stuff is not well documented. I mean, you mentioned how you had to go into the SDUT archives, right? To
Well,
find a
I
lot of
haven't
this
done the
information.
UT yet, but other newspapers
Other
which are
newspapers,
now
sure.
defunct. But yes,
Right.
go in and yes, search
Which I think
through.
is fair to say is not the most straightforward thing for the average person to do and find. So
Right.
it's good to kind of, I don't know that there's anywhere else this information is aggregated. So consider this a public service, I guess.
Yeah, it's fun. I enjoy doing it. It's fun learning about our history. One little tidbit about that match that I saw in the newspaper article was that they were giving out a little 4-page pamphlet, and it sounded like it was a combination of a game program, but also a little bit about the history of the sport, and along with some other things. I'm not really sure what was in there, but boy, how I would love to get my hands on a copy of that if a copy were to ever exist. I can't imagine, you know, maybe somewhere like someone held on to one of those things, but that would be pretty cool to see what that little pamphlet looked like, what they gave out to people who were in attendance there. And I don't know yet. I have to dig in a little deeper if this was a regular occurrence and the San Diego Football Weekly was, became anything bigger. So that's kind of where we are right now with the research. But I was very intrigued by that, and how cool would that be if a copy of that survived?
Yeah. Well, and it goes to show the value of physical copies of media. I hate to sound like, you know, a Luddite or whatever, but I'm increasingly becoming aware of the fact that I own very little of the things I buy these days, and so I'm making a more conscious effort to get, physical copies if I can, because,
Yeah.
for that exact reason. There is a Spurs Tottenham podcaster who I don't listen to a whole lot anymore, just because I I don't know. I don't do podcasts as much as I used to, but his background is his entire wall in his office is like his entire life. He's kept every game. What are they called? You know what I'm talking about. The little booklet you buy, the program,
Yeah, the fanzines
the
or
program.
programs.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
he's got every single one from every game he's ever been to, which is most of his life, cataloged on this wall. And it's like that is such a you think about it, it's a fun collection, but it's actually like a really impressive repository of information that
right.
we unfortunately are lacking here.
Yeah, I stumbled across someone who is collecting and digitizing fanzines, the fan magazines, especially in England in that area, but from around the world, but primarily in the UK. And I've been following that. It's been, I mean, talk about an insight into the especially supporter culture of the time. And not all of it's good. I mean, there's some highly offensive kind of things in those fanzines, especially by today's standards. But it does help add additional context, especially when you're talking about in England the hooliganism era, where things really got bad through the 70s and 80s and earlyish 90s. But yeah, it's interesting to also see just the what kinds of things they talked about in these little 4-page booklets, whatever they were, that they would, people would do for free and put them together and hand them out to other supporters as they came to the match. All right,
Yeah.
let's sorry.
No, I was just gonna say it's not always a necessarily positive glimpse, but an authentic glimpse into the past is
Authentic,
valuable
yes.
either way.
Right. Keeping it kind of in San Diego, we'll do some brief San Diego news here. Both our top professional men's and women's teams, SDFC and the Wave, both are in the playoffs, continuing in the playoffs. They both play Portland this weekend. The Wave has a match away on Saturday, I believe, and SDFC is home on Sunday. Any thoughts about our top level teams here in the county being in the playoffs?
Yeah, Wave, they've done well to make the playoffs, considering that I think even the most optimistic of supporters would tell you it's been a tumultuous season. I don't think that the coach has lived up to the expectations, really. I mean, I was pretty excited when he came in, and it doesn't really seem like he's been able to translate his style the way he wanted to necessarily. So I think, a mediocre season, unfortunately, and capped off by giving us that false hope of going, 1-0 up on the road against the best team who are, sandbagging it because they're not playing for anything. And then collapsing, 4-1 was the final score. And it doesn't instill a lot of confidence for Wave going into Portland, where San Diego FC just struggled. I guess that was a nice natural segue. And San Diego FC, I mean, what can I say? Like, they went and parked the bus in the last few minutes there at the end and ended up conceding a goal in stoppage time. I haven't watched that many games this season, but it's my understanding parking the bus is not their identity. And this is what happens when you do that, and especially in a place like Providence Park. Like, I know a lot of people who are either maybe newer to MLS or are just not superstitious when it comes to sport, which is like the only area of my life I'm superstitious, by the way. Providence Park has an aura, and if you haven't been there, I don't care what you say about that, because just go and then tell me that it doesn't. If you go to penalties at Providence Park, I don't rate your chances of winning. It's just that simple. When that goal went in stoppage time, I was like, oh shit, we're going to lose this in penalties then. And it does make you wonder. I hate to be that guy, but I know I'm not the only one thinking it. Are they going to San Diego this? Because the home form's not been great lately. And Portland haven't been a great team either, but they'll take a lot of momentum out of that game. I'm sure their supporters will turn up on Sunday or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I would love San Diego to come out and thump them, but it is going to be one of those situations where every 10 minutes that tick by, if they haven't scored, is going to ratchet up the anxiety, right? And that hey, San Diego teams don't do well in those situations, unfortunately. So I don't know. I feel better about SDFC than I do about Wave, but not by as much as you probably should, considering they won the Western Conference.
Yeah. I unfortunately didn't get to see that match at
Oh,
all
I didn't either.
because
I read about match reports and stuff.
yeah,
I'm a
I was
cheapskate.
busy. I was busy working the doing the live stream for the US Open
Oh
Cup
shit! I
qualifying
forgot I
tournament
forgot it
round
was on the
3
same
for
time.
two of our local teams that I know you were at as well. In
Yes.
fact, we do have a picture here that was taken
I'll
of
be honest. We were paying a lot of attention to the World Series game as well, so we were really juggling a
yeah.
few things there. Yeah.
So of I think as Steve put it there in the his blue sky post, his skeet out there about the loyal Colt or the loyal Colt hooligans. But we have us there, and Tony and Shiva in the back from Two Balls and a Mic and San Diego Punto Football, and I helped them with the live stream for the match between our last two San Diego teams that were in round 3, and that was SD Enter and City SC San Diego at Mission Bay High School, and SD Enter won that 2-1. Like the game got quite interesting towards the end. It was really got a bit more lively in the last about 15 minutes. There were good opportunities for both sides to score, but SD Enter will move on to the final qualifying round. They will play, I'm guessing, I don't know the draw, whatever will happen later this week. So by next episode, we should have who they're actually playing, but I would bet good money on it that they're going to play Laguna United. It's just a matter of where they are going to play. And if they do, that's going to be a rematch of last year's game, which Laguna United won, and they're the ones that made it to the Open Cup proper. So we'll see where the game, what happens with the draw and who hosts and where they're actually playing, if that's the opponent. And home or away, maybe we can get a few more people to come out and watch the game. So give me your thoughts on the match and what possibly coming up for the next match here.
Yeah. Quick question before I do. So City SC, they're like a county-wide thing, or is it? Because I know they have a club. Like, there's a team, and this was the Carlsbad team, I think, but there's a Chula Vista team, right, as well? Or is that just a youth
I don't know
thing?
if there's a Chula Vista. I believe there is, and it's not just San Diego, but they have these
So it's
City
like a
SC teams
nationwide
around
thing.
some other places as well. But there's a Temecula
Okay.
one. The
Okay.
the San Diego one, they have a UPSL team and they have a USL2 team. They have both. And
Interesting.
the
Okay.
UPSL team is the one that
That's in the Open Cup.
qualified for, or
Right,
actually
because
that
you.
entered, sorry, didn't qualify, entered to this and not their USL2 team. And I'm guessing probably because the USL2 team might have a few more
Well, I
college
mean, USL
players on
two
it.
is closer to finishing their previous season than they are to starting their next one. So I think that
Yes.
probably has something to do with that. Okay, I wasn't quite sure about that, so I just wanted to make sure. Yes, it was a much better game than the last round. So that was fun, and like you said, it was pretty lively at the end, and that's one of the things you love about cup football is when one team's losing, they have to try and come back. So it was a good game, and I'm looking forward to the next round. I'm hoping the game will get scheduled for San Diego rather than Orange County. I'm not sure about that, but it looks like it might. So keeping an eye on that, and
Yeah,
then hopefully they can
I
get the
don't,
Open Cup proper. Because I imagine for a club like, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but a club like SD Inter, I mean, who don't have, as far as I know, they don't have youth teams or anything. It's just the one team. I mean, even making the first round like that is going to be money to help them, keep going for the next year. So that would be really big for them, and it would be cool. I'm trying to keep a closer eye on what they're doing.
yeah, it'll be, I mean, good for them, good for the region. It's been a while. I think we commented I don't think we had any San Diego teams make it to
We didn't.
the
City
Open
S
Cup
or
proper.
Inter lost in this round, the final round, which they're in now. Last year, I believe.
Right. Yeah, it was for having when the Loyal were around and Albion, and right before that 1904. I mean, we had quite a few in Chula Vista as well. I mean, we were getting some good local initial Open Cup matches, and yeah, we missed out last year. So it'll be nice. It'd be nice if we can have some teams back, especially since who knows what's happening with MLS for that to even be a possibility. But hopefully we'll get a lower league San Diego team back in the tournament proper.
Well, especially because SDFC, by virtue of being in the CONCACAF Champions Cup or whatever it's called now, won't be in the U.S. Open Cup next year, correct?
Probably not. Well, I mean, it depends whatever MLS and US soccer negotiate, but based on what we've seen the last couple of seasons, I would guess that those teams that play there, if anything, they'll play Leagues Cup if that even exists. I don't even know if that's going to continue, but
Oh, is
yeah,
that on? Is that potentially not going to continue? I didn't. I thought that
I,
had been a
I have,
smashing success for them
yeah,
financially.
I have heard from different pockets that I think there's some discussions. I would be surprised if it goes away, but I think there are discussions where people are not quite as happy with how it hasn't met the goals I think that people within
Well, what was the
MLS
goal other
wanted it
than
to
make a bunch of
achieve.
money? Are they
Yeah,
not making a
well,
bunch of money? I,
that's what I'm hearing.
oh well, hey, why don't they just put that effort into the Open Cup then? That would be cool.
Well, that is the big question, right? Since they basically oversaw the Open Cup for so long. But I sure we both know the answer to it. They don't because they don't control it. The League's Cup was something they completely control. And again, this to me is a fundamental problem with our closed league system that we have here. But we'll talk about that a little more in a second. Before we do that, sticking with lower leagues, there was a ton of lower league USL men's, well, not a ton, lots of conversation about a couple of key things. The first one I want to get out of the way that's probably important to maybe our San Diego listeners is Nate Miller going to Boise. What are your thoughts about that?
I like that. I didn't know this, but I was made aware by a good friend of mine who used to work for Loyal that apparently Nate Miller, like when he went to RSL as an assistant coach, said he's like never coming back to the USL or something. I missed that, and I don't know
Hmm.
how serious he was about that, but whatever. But I think it's a good hire. I think USL League One is probably a better level for him to be cutting his chops as a head coach for the first time realistically, because I mean he had the 1 year at Loyal, but like he was, that's the club was folding, like it. That's tough. So I think League One's a good place
Yeah.
for him to really like kind of find his feet as his own head coach in a new place with a new club. And we've discussed Boise on this podcast before. I'm very excited about the Boise team. I think they've done a lot of things right. They're super hyper focused on the local community there. I mean, we've talked about how the club badge and like image is based around the Basque diaspora in Idaho that is apparently a thing. And it's like, I didn't even know that was a thing. So that's cool that they're that hyper local focused. So that seems like a fun match. A team I already wanted to root for was hiring a coach I want to root for. So hopefully, hey, hopefully some ex-Loyal players end up there. That would be fun.
Yeah, that would be fun. And Nate Miller was a head coach. I can't remember the team
Oh,
now
that's true. It was
before he came
Lansing
to,
Ignite.
but
Yes.
yeah, I was gonna say a lower league team. Um, but yeah, it'll be good for him to start kind of fresh. He can build it in his image, so to speak. So that'll be great. I like you. I am looking forward to it. It makes me a little more excited about Boise and some of these new teams that are coming on. And before that happens next year, we still haven't quite finished this year. So we do have the playoffs. We had opening day for League One and Championship this this last weekend, the opening round, and there were I don't know how much you followed, a ton of upsets.
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't watch any matches. I had other stuff going on, but yes, I did see that.
Yeah, it's you had 8 seeds beat number 1 seeds. I think I saw somewhere that only one, like we have the Eastern and Western conferences, uh, that only one of the, so you have the top 1 and 2 seeds in each side, only one of them advanced. And I'm trying to remember which one exactly, but Louisville got knocked out by Detroit. Very, very one-off games, right? You're playing single game elimination, and this is it. I, I want to go back to say I found the conversation post this weekend very interesting because on the one hand, you hear people say, like, Americans love their playoffs. You need playoffs, 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 playoffs. And now we have the number one team get upset by the 8 seed, and the conversation all of a sudden is, does the season even mean anything anymore if all these people can make the playoffs? And I, you know, not that they're just people complaining all the time, but very interesting how like everybody's super excited, and then when the top teams don't win, it's like, oh, well, what does the season even matter anymore if you finish and get a high seed? So give me
Yeah,
your thoughts on any of those takes.
I agree. Generally speaking, it's kind of funny because fans keep complaining that playoffs are feeling less and less meaningful, and leagues are reacting to that by expanding the playoff pools, which I guess at face value makes sense. More teams are involved, more fan bases involved. But what it really does is it dilutes the playoffs. Like it makes them less interesting and less important because, like you said, you can be Louisville, the best team ever in the USL Championship, and whatever, lose to Detroit. No disrespect to Detroit, they are giant killers in the USL. This is what they do in the playoffs. They go win scrappy 1-0 games on the road or at Keyworth. Like this is what they do. So that's not, I'm not talking about them here. Like, but it is a one-off game against a whole season of dominance. So it I don't know. I'm not saying I know well, that's not true. I do think I know what the solution is personally. I think the solution is you declare the regular season winner the winner, and then you take the playoffs and play it throughout the length of the regular season, and you call it a cup. I know that's a novel idea,
Yep.
but it's my idea. Yeah, I don't know. It's ironic because this occurred to me when baseball expanded past 5 teams. Actually, no, when they expanded to 5 teams, like 2 wildcard teams who played the 1-game playoff, which in baseball is super dumb. It occurred to me that just made the playoffs worse, and I don't know. I feel like executives know this, but they don't care because more games equals more money, and I don't know. Upsets are fun, but it almost feels manufactured when the pools are this big.
Yeah. I my biggest take on all this is, for a sport like soccer, I get it. We do playoffs here in the US, but like, why do we keep trying to reinvent the wheel with the sport that is loved around the world and is done a certain way in every single country and been successful? And when I think about these things, my mind keeps going back to Japan, which was one of those that we covered in our Pro-Rel series. And they kind of had an option, right? They could, because they've adopted a lot of sports, and a lot of people would look at, say it's very American, their sports culture, but they made a conscious decision with the J League to model their soccer, not around what they were doing in their other sports, baseball or anything else, but model it around what the rest of the world does in soccer. And it has been immensely successful. And I think my personal feeling is the sooner we can move beyond like the feeling that we must have playoffs and a huge expanded kind of playoffs at the end of the season, the better off we'll be in terms of soccer. We have tons of people who watch soccer in this country, and people are complaining, why aren't more people watching MLS or USL or watching local soccer? There's a variety of reasons, but part of it is our soccer is not really exactly like the rest of the world's soccer. And I think the sooner we understand that and get more in line with the rest of the world, and especially for USL, if it wants to differentiate itself from MLS, they should do that sooner rather than later, because MLS has spent 30 years getting it so, like, starting with the crazy shootouts and everything else that they did, and slowly, and not really by choice but from outside pressure, slowly getting more and more in line with the rest of the world. And that's my bigger feeling on the playoffs. We see playoff type things when we see promotion races, right?
Yes.
Especially you look at England, top two advance, then you have a little playoff structure. You get the knockout idea, just like you said, when you do your season long tournament, whether you do it as the in season cup for all the teams that year, or you do it like a Champions League format where I finished top of my league, depending on which country you are, but let's just say, I finished in the top 5 of my league. So now I get to go play in this bigger tournament against other teams that also finished in the top of their league. Or, like they've done in Europe, we have 3 levels of this continental tournament. But to me, reward the season. I'm going to talk about this in a second when we get into our main part of our show, but have your season actually mean something and have a reward for doing well in the season. But part of that is having balanced tables, which we don't, other than League One in USL the last couple of years, we haven't really done much of a balance. Actually, even League One didn't do a true balance table because there were a few other games that they had a third meeting in. But I think get to a balance table format, do your cup competitions, do a next year kind of tournament for your strong teams. You start doing those things, and I think you'll get more people gravitate to your sport instead of, kind of half-assing it, I guess. Because, when I can watch Champions League in the middle of the day, um, and see the rest of the world doing tournaments and things more in line the same way with each other, and we're kind of the outlier, because for some reason we think Americans just won't accept it if you do it differently, and we've got way more Americans watching the world's game than we do the American game.
We do. And so there's a lot that I wanted to address there. So I'm going to try and remember everything, but I'll probably
Okay.
forget some. But just working backwards, I do think, I mean, and we've covered this to, really no end, but there is an extent to which soccer has been done this way in America because there are people who would rather it be done in a way that they make a bunch of money from it or it not be done at all. Like that
Right.
has happened throughout American sports history, really. So it's not unique to soccer, but has not taken hold in soccer the way it has in other American sports, probably because it can spread around the world. And I think that from a financial aspect and always trying to work from the top down is part of the reason. But I also think that generally speaking, there's this attitude in America where we have to be the best at stuff. And so if we're not the best, we have to reinvent the rules, right? I think it's Andy Bernard in The Office says the Bernards don't lose, they quit and accuse the other party of cheating. And it's we kind of, not that extent, but it is kind of that idea where it's okay, we're not the best at soccer. So rather than just do what the world does, we're going to change it so we can be the best at our own unique way of doing it. And obviously over time, those things have chipped away to the point that we largely just play the same game that the rest of the world does. It's the league structure where the things are different. But it is kind of that American idea, right? Where, I mean, I don't think we would articulate it as such, but if we're not the best at something, we feel the need to make our own version of it instead of just doing it on the world stage. And the other thing I wanted to say too is I think if someone were to look at Japan, going all the way back to the start of what you were saying, and say that they have an American sports culture, I think that person fundamentally misunderstands Japanese like culture, and I'm not saying I'm an expert, but they do not have an American sports culture. And like, just because they do baseball and they do baseball professionally, somewhat similarly to the way we do in America, like their sports culture literally couldn't be more different. Like even in baseball, the way they do the high school tournament and stuff, and like players get scouted straight from that and not necessarily going to college, and like it's a super different culture, and there's much more of a collectivist mentality there. And I'm not going to get into the political side of that because that's a whole fucking can of worms. But there is a more collectivist mentality there, and what that helps to produce, I'm not going to say it's the only reason, but what it helps to produce is a strategy more focused at developing from the bottom up rather than the top down, which we saw with the J League. And I know they literally went, top down, right? They had the J1 first, then they added the J2, and then added the J3. But they were doing that all the while building up the bottom so that they could then
Exactly.
add that next layer underneath, right? And so it's that kind of collective understanding, like we talked about the 25-year plan or whatever it is. It's not going to be next year that you're making a bunch of money. It's going to be in 25 years that you're making a bunch of money. And like people are very bought into this. You have a whole generation of people who grew up with this and are very bought into it. And I think that MLS has kind of missed that ship now because you have that generation of people who grew up with it and are now like kind of disillusioned with it because it's like gotten better, but it hasn't really like changed with the times. It's still all these ridiculous fucking roster rules that I know people don't understand. And I know that people will like sing the praises of the parity in the MLS, but like I don't know, to me, maybe this is a personal thing, but like this manufactured idea of parity like is almost worse than just like the rugged capitalism of the Premier League, because like at least that is authentic in a way. And I don't think the MLS is as, I don't know what the adjectival form is, but I don't think the MLS has as much parity as people like to say, because even though there's a different team winning every year, it's like the same 8 clubs in the final 8 teams usually, right? Like it is not as balanced as people would have you believe. And I know this because I'm a San Jose Earthquakes fan, ostensibly, if you ask me to like pick a team. They've been dog shit my whole life, especially since Chris Wondolowski retired. So like I don't know. I think there was like a lot there, and I really don't have a unifying way to tie it all together. But I think that it's silly of us to try and like shoehorn our own thing into this. And the MLS is doing what it's doing, and I'm sure it's making enough money because otherwise we wouldn't be going. But I think what people really want is like, especially in this day and age where experiences cost so fucking much, and like going to a ball game is a ridiculous expense. Like cheap
Right.
local soccer is it. Like that, and all sports benefit from viewership in person, I would argue, to varying degrees. But I think soccer more than anything, because I don't think people realize like how fast paced it is if they've only ever watched it on TV. I don't think they realize how physical it is if they've only watched it on TV. And I don't think they realize how quick it is if they've only watched it on TV. I remember I used to look up the clock in Loyal games and be like, oh my God, we're already in like the 40th minute. Like half of my fun night is gone already. And it's like, I don't I don't think people quite realize that until they've gone and watched it in person. And having local clubs where people can connect with them, like we did with
Yeah.
Loyal, or like people will in Boise or Portland, Maine, or well, fair play to Portland, Oregon too. But that's not really what I'm talking about here. Or Vermont, like people will buy in if you give them something that they feel like they can identify with, and that's where MLS totally misses it. Like, and I know SDFC fans will push. No, actually, I don't think they will push back. Like, they love the club, but they also recognize like the Chrome and Azul thing is stupid. The butthole design is stupid. Like the San Diego FC name generic is stupid. But like they love the club because it's local, right? Imagine if that club like actually identified like with the local, flavor, if you will. So anyway, that was a lot of rambly, like disconnected stuff, but I wanted to try and respond to some thoughts I had for some of the stuff we were talking about.
Yeah, let's
Also, Archie was squeezing in behind me, so I kept getting distracted here.
we'll stay in USL. And I was trying to decide which of the next two big news items, one today and one yesterday, we'd talk about. But I think let's go with the North Carolina FC one first, kind of based on a lot of stuff we were just talking about, connecting with your community, so forth. But for those who haven't heard, North Carolina FC, well, it was a crazy day of news stories. Today. We were talking about it right before we, started the live stream. That Tom Bogert sends out. I saw a skate on Blue Sky, and it made it sound with his phrasing like there was imminent financial collapse. Like they should make it through the playoffs, I think was the phrasing. Like they won't be back next year, but they should make it through the playoffs.
You're right. That is
Which
not. Yeah.
which set off a flurry of, activity on social media. And then all these little bits and pieces came in. I saw an excerpt of an email that was sent out to season ticket holders that somebody shared. I saw that North Carolina FC actually put out a statement. I saw that USL put out a statement, and they're all just a little bit different from each other. But the bottom line seems to be, and this, of course, now it's got all the people on the pro-rel or anti-pro-rel all, going back and forth at each other. But, the bottom line right now, at least what it appears to be, is that the North Carolina FC, which, they also have the women's team, the Courage, and the NWSL, and I don't really know how the franchises work in USL, because everybody talks about how it's basically expiring at the end of this season or has already expired, just depending on what phrasing you looked at. And they're not going to renew it, but instead they're going to take a 2-year hiatus, try to get some things together, and come back at the Division 1 level in 2028. So, that whole change during the day, but this is, I find this, I know you have some thoughts, so I'm sure we're going to go back and forth. I have a lot of questions, first of all, and a lot of thoughts, but I'll say my overall general one is, I think if you read carefully and maybe read between the lines of the USL statement and the North Carolina statement, I do not think they are on the same page. I think North Carolina, whatever their issues are, I think they've said they're going to try for D1 status, but based on a lot of other things I'm saying, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's not just being said to appease, your fans of that team, to like give them hope, even though that might not actually be there. And if you read the USL, it's like, yeah, like they can do this if they want. The options there for them, but they need to meet this, and this if they are going to show. It really seemed like maybe in the bigger picture, this is actually better for everyone moving along. And again, it's not the team or the players or the fans, it's the owners. And I think you have a little bit more of these ownership kind of problems potentially in your closed leagues, because things don't change the same way like they would in promotion relegation.
Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought.
All right, I can jump in if you need.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, total brain fart there. I got a text message and I totally got derailed.
It's I saw some people. It's like, well, look, this is what happens in Pro-Rel. I'm like, okay, we're not even in Pro-Rel. How can you even make that equation?
Right. Yes, but I remember what I was going to say.
Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
I if this proves to work, then it will, in hindsight, look like a financial masterstroke or whatever. It is hard to envision, though, how a club that feels they can't even say with certainty they will make it through the end of the playoffs, where they are ostensibly in with a chance to win a title, will in 2 years be in so much better of a financial position that they will not only be able to come back, but at a significantly higher financial level. It seems not impossible, but unlikely. And so I don't take a lot of comfort in that announcement, no matter what anybody says, because I look at Oklahoma City Energy. How many years in a row have they said they're coming back? And it's how many years have they been gone? It's 4 or 5 years they've been gone. like 2 or 3 years in a row. They've said they're coming back. Still fucking nothing has happened. It happened with.
And I just heard a story about them
Well,
coming
don't
back.
even tell me because I don't want to know. It's probably not positive. I was just going to say too, though. You look at Brooklyn FC's men's team keeps getting delayed, if not canceled. Queensboro, what the fuck happened with that? Like, I don't know. Clubs folding away with the intent of coming back. I don't. It's like when people take a break in their relationship. It's like, well, it might work out, but I don't know.
But we have the if we go the other extreme, we do have examples that have been successful where teams have opted to self-relegate and then come back. Fort Wayne, right?
Sure, but
It's coming back into
self-relegation
League
and
One.
hiatus are two very different things.
Exactly. Yes. And as I saw some other people, I'm not sure how thing I read it was phrased, but I was thinking the same thing. Like, how do you expect to go into League One when, like, why wouldn't you, or sorry, in the first division if you wouldn't just drop to League One? Why not self-relegate
exactly.
and keep going and still work on the things you need to work on? So there's a lot of this, I think, has nothing to do, well, I shouldn't say nothing to do, less to do with the league structure, anything else, and way more with the ownership of this particular team.
Yeah, I agree, and like I said, if it turns out to work, then fair play. But it doesn't instill a lot of confidence, I guess is what I'll say.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say with this is and I'll talk about this more when we get into the rest of the plan here that we didn't finish last week. I am not a fan of this idea that a team even could do this. Like, we're going to skip out for 2 seasons. You guys can sort out Pro-Rel however you want over the next couple of seasons, because there is some indication that Pro-Rel could start as soon as 2027, even before the first division starts. Now, that remains to be seen. But I don't like the idea that someone's stepping out and then thinking, or even the league entertaining the idea that someone can just jump in at the, like, buy their way past anybody else. But also, again, which makes me doubt the whole North Carolina situation is, okay, but you jump the line and go first division, you could be relegated that very first year because you're not prepared and ready. You think you're bringing a team in with the protection of first division and better, I don't know, television revenue or whatever might come along with a first division league. And to me, that's an ownership group that doesn't seem serious about being in a league with promotion relegation.
Agreed.
And you know what? Then that's good. That ownership group should leave. It is terrible, though, that it comes at the expense of the players and the fans.
Yeah, it is, and especially with two of our favorite former Loyal guys there, Conway and
Martin, right?
Martin,
Colin.
Colin Martin, yeah. So it's too bad, and I feel for the fans. I know the NWSL team is pretty well supported there, so hopefully this means some consolidation on that front. But I'd be worried if I were a Courage fan as well, to be honest with you.
But that's also a potential long-term problem since USL has launched the Super League. There may be for some of these teams that have a team outside of the USL ecosystem, that also might start to be an issue one way or the other. So I'm sure all that will start playing out over the next couple of years, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, our last big piece of news, which was huge news before the North Carolina news broke today, USL has hired, what's his name now? I don't have it in front of me. Tony Scholes from the Premier League to join the USL as the new first division, whatever that's going to be called in USL, but the president of the new first division. He will start in 2026 after the Premier League season ends and come on board and help set the parameters for what teams need to, however they're going to work out their first division. So he's there to help that out and also help with the overall promotion relegation, at least from the reports that I've read. So, what are your thoughts? I have mixed feelings on this
I mean,
hire.
I don't know much about the guy, but I would think somebody who's worked in the EFL would at least have some good ideas about how to make this work. So it seemed like a good hire, but I don't know much about the guy.
My initial thought is great. This means USL's serious about doing promotion relegation. We know they want a first division, but
Right.
serious about really implementing promotion relegation. You're bringing in someone with experience. So on the one hand, I think it shows the seriousness that with which USL is moving forward. On the other hand, I my biggest red flag I'm seeing through all of USL, and this is going to be very contrary to my plan that I will talk about, that I think USL should move forward with. It feels to me like USL is prioritizing, even though there's hints out there that they may start Pro-Rel early, but they are prioritizing this first division above everything else. And I think that means the whole idea of a pyramid and promotion relegation could suffer in the near term. And again, I think if you look at Japan just as an example of a country that had, well, look at the difference between Japan, Canada, and Australia, right? You have a country that had a vision of how they wanted to move forward with this and build out this pyramid with what they had existing and the way they approached it, as opposed to Canada and Australia, which also trying to build out pyramids with what they have, but taking a very different approach. And Canada and Australia are, we'll see where they are. They're only 10 years ish into their plan, where Japan is more than 30. So maybe Australia and Canada will catch up, but because of their different approaches, I really think when you see some of the struggles that Canada and Australia are having, like Japan really should be more of the model you're looking at if you want to have a way to kind of build this quickly. And this may sound contrary to what I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, but it feels like they're trying to set a high bar standards for their first league, almost like they want to compete against Major League Soccer. And I think that potentially could undermine their second and third division in USL Championship and League One, because you're going to pull resources out of that. I think it's the wrong way to approach this, at least from the outside signals. So that's what concerns me, is that there's this rush to bring in new ownership groups and bigger stadia and whatever else they think their top league should have. And that's the priority. And then we'll try to do promotion relegation. And I think, yeah, not that that can't work, but I think it will significantly slow down the process.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I guess we'll see. I had assumed that those two things were tied together, but maybe not. But like we said, it makes more sense to build from the bottom up. So I would think you'd want to kind of make sure that the places teams could get relegated to are set up functionally before you're deciding where they're getting promoted to.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive in then to our main part of the show here. Last week we looked at how to reimagine the USL ecosystem, and the vision I laid out was having multiple independent regional pyramids, football pyramids, rather than one big national football pyramid. And we went through all the reasons why. And one of the biggest is our country is so large. Like, we see Canada and Australia trying to have a combination of the two, some regional footprints, but then a national footprint on top, and they're having trouble connecting them. It's very difficult. I think our population distribution of our country is a little better than what we see in Canada and Australia. That is, Canada and Australia have much more areas of their country that are just huge open land that's not populated, where we are spread out a little bit more. But we do have some of that problem, especially in the West. We have big open swaths of land that are not densely populated like you see along the eastern seaboard. So I think in looking at our country, we need to think of it more like Europe and treat our country more like a larger confederation as opposed to just a single country. And to highlight that, I'm just going to pull up this map. And again, this all stems from, this whole conversation started from the morning kick around video that we've linked to several times in previous episodes. But let me pull this slide deck up here as an example of a map that someone put together. I did not put this together, but shows not every European country, but many European countries kind of sprinkled in around in a way to kind of make them fit within the continental United States. And you have like Germany up in the Pacific Northwest, and next to that in green you got France, and then in blue a little further over to the right you've got Spain, and some countries are really they've been rotated. They're not in their normal position, so it's a little harder to see them. But you see the UK in here, and you see Norway and Sweden and Finland and Switzerland and Iceland, like all these countries, and they're kind of squeezed in. But you can fit many of the European countries in the footprint of the United States. And I think I don't think people appreciate how big our country is, because Italy itself, we talk about them as a country and their top division, and they have multiple divisions of teams, and the UK and Germany, right? So my argument last week was that we should have more independent regional pyramids and let them develop independently from each other and tie them together with like a national Champions League style tournament. So that was the big kind of overview from last week. And my argument was for 4 regions, like we have on the screen here, that are based on the normal regions we have through various levels of US soccer. Region 1 is the East, Region 2 is the Midwest, Region 3 is the South, and Region 4 is the West. And use that kind of as your starting point to get 4 independent pyramids in those areas, because they tend to share things. They share climate, they share similar, sometimes population density, right? There's lots of things where each of these independent regional pyramids could develop, again, independently, but kind of solve those issues, because the issues and travel and other things you have on the West are very different than some of the issues you may have in the South or on the Northeast part of the US. So again, that was the argument. And then today we're going to look at, all right, well then what would a regional pyramid kind of look like? So Dylan, anything you want to add before we kind of break down at least my thoughts of a pyramid, and then how the USL could go this direction, although based especially on stuff we've seen publicly between the last episode and this episode, it seems like the USL is going in a very different direction. But humor me while we go through this, and then we'll talk about the priorities I think USL should have in order to get this to work.
Well, yeah, I think the regionality makes a lot of sense, especially as you said, in a country as big as the United States, and as variably densely populated. I know that's not conjugated correctly, but you know what I'm saying. Like in the Northeast corridor, you have like really high population density, and like you said, out west, I mean, nearly half the country area-wise is so sparsely populated when you do it by like a people per mile, square mile, or whatever average. So it I think makes a lot of sense to regionalize for travel costs, and especially, I mean, maybe I could see the first division, the argument for that being national, but anything under that would really need to be regional. And we see this in other sports too. Major League Baseball, and I know minor league, they're all affiliates, but it's heavily regionalized, and it's because it just makes sense.
Right. And one of the concerns, my argument for doing independent regionalized pyramids is you force then to always have teams in those regions, key teams. If you did a true national league and you do promotion relegation, that footprint could drastically change over a period of 5 years. You could get a situation, let's say like Australia, where you have quite the large concentration of teams down in the southeast of Australia. But if you go over to Western Australia, you have a team in Perth. Like that's it. Like their games are
Right.
constantly going across the country all the time. And I think that is a legitimate concern when you're trying to build out your ecosystem for the game, to keep that regionalization in place all the way up through your top division, but then have these national tournaments, which would be the equivalent of like a Champions League style tournament, and your US Cup and your Open Cup. Like there's lots of additional opportunities for trophies, right? And you can still play teams from around the country that are at an equivalent level, especially if you do a Champions League style thing. But the Open Cup still gives an opportunity for all teams to be involved, and the USL Cup, if they keep the same kind of idea, can allow for some interesting regroupings of things to get people, if they do a group format. Like who knows what kind of format they'll do as they move forward with the USL Cup. But for the pyramid, if we are looking at it, ideally, when I was just kind of looking at numbers, well, the structure and kind of what we've alluded to with Japan, and Japan kind of did an interesting thing of going from top down, but also from bottom up. But they separated their pyramid into 3 tiers, and I think that is a good model. There's a professional tier, there is a pre-professional tier, and then there's the amateur tier. And in each of those, as they were building them, they were loosely linked together. So if you're in the pre-professional tier, this is a team that wants to be go pro, but maybe they haven't quite met all the requirements to be pro. As like they're still in leagues, they're still competing, but as they earn it on merit and have met the other requirements, they can move up into the professional rank, especially if there's room. But then on the professional side, if you just take that tier, and right now they have 3 divisions, J1, J2, and J3, and we could do a similar thing. Is they did J1 first, and as soon as J1 was filled out, then they got J2 together, so they started promoting, moving teams up. So now you could do promotion relegation among the top teams, and you allow that pre-professional to help fill out your professional thing. But you make it so there's, to me, ideally, that there's not as big of a gap between pre-professional and professional. Now, one of the problems I see, if we look at USL in its current form, USL2 is really the pre-professional kind of arena, but because it's so heavily tied to college athletes in the college game, it plays a short, tiny season. So it's not really representative of playing year-round and having players year-round and all the things you need to do year-round soccer. So they're not playing year-round, but then you're also changing the budget significantly just to go from USL2 to League One, which now all of a sudden you're on a national footprint. And I think we're making these steps way too big. We need to get some more tiers and things in place. And this is where I think regionalization helps. It helps with the travel, but we need to make those a little more like baby steps going up and down the pyramid rather than gigantic leaps where now you need a new owner with a huge investment of funds. So that's the big picture. In each pyramid, a professional tier, a pre-professional tier, and an amateur tier. Now, how many divisions are in each of those? That depends on so many factors. I think ideally, I'd like to see at least 3 in the professional tier. And in those, I would have, again, for a lot of reasons, and this is also probably going to rub people the wrong way, but I would go with a 14 team league. I think 14 is big enough, gives you 26 games, but the games really are going to matter, right? Because you don't have 38 games. But one of the biggest complaints that players have, that lots of people have, is schedule congestion. And we keep having these tournaments and other things going on. So if you can limit your season a little bit, and again, I came up with 14 when I was playing with the numbers. That seemed to work well. But that also then frees up some dates. So maybe your tournaments that you play, your USL Cup, maybe some Open Cup dates, maybe some other things, allow you to maybe have a break in your schedule. So on the next weekend, you could have those games and you're not squeezing everything in the midweek. Now, I'm not married to 14 teams in each, but that just, when I was crunching numbers and looking at especially our top tier teams, if they were going to compete in a national footprint, and maybe it's USL Cup and a Champions League style tournament and the Open Cup, like you're starting to add games if you start getting anywhere down the line in those tournaments. So keep your regionalization a little smaller for those tiers, but I would still do 3 up, 3 down, do 2 automatics, do promotion playoffs for the other tiers as you start building that out. And then regionally, I'd have 3 big trophies. You'd have your Shield winners if you were in Division One. I would do a very mini playoff, maybe 5 teams at most from the top, maybe just the top 4, just to do a little cup for the top winners. And then maybe do a regional cup, kind of like USL Cup, but just for that region, anybody in the USL ecosystem. And then take the winners of those 3 could participate in your Champions League style tournament you have nationally, along with what other requirements. But it would also allow potentially some people outside of that first division to earn a berth in one of these national tournaments. And, like Europe does, we could have our equivalent of Europa League or Conference League as well as things build out. But actually, I think that was kind of the big thing for what the individual pyramid would look like. And I'll pause there for a second, then I'll talk about how I think if the USL were to go here, how they should start, even though I don't think this is what they're going to do at all.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think that's what they're going to do. I'm not married to any particular number. I think 14 sounds reasonable, especially for the USL's ambitions. Excuse me. I think a lot of people don't realize, too, that the number of teams in a top flight league, even in the more established European leagues, has been pretty fluid over time.
Right.
So it's not like this is something set in stone that has to be one way or the other.
Yeah, you look at a country right now like Denmark does 12 in their top division, and they have an interesting league schedule the way they do it. There's lots of options out there that you can look at and implement and maybe tweak slightly. Again, as you said as well, I'm not totally married to just 14, but I think it makes your games meaningful. It's going to make your shield winner like you've earned it for the season, but also then frees up some time in your schedule for FIFA international windows as well. So you're not playing through those. That you make games meaningful. You get not exactly like the NFL, but one of the reasons the NFL is so successful as well is the home games, you have so few of them.
Right.
So people show up. And I think, sometimes owners and people who run leagues go the wrong direction. They try to, well, we need more home matches. Well, you get too many of them, and it's too many for people, the average person, to attend.
Right.
And if you don't have enough casuals to fill out that space, then that's not going to be a successful long-term thing for you to bring people into your matches.
Yeah, I agree. And that's not to say that, I mean, you could argue more games would mean there's more opportunities to go and therefore lower prices. But you look at the Padres, and that's, they got 81 home games a year, and it's still expensive as shit. So
Yeah.
I don't know. At some point, you
Well,
gotta go the other way.
yeah. If I were starting it, and these are like from what we've done through our podcast and talking about these pro-rel stories and the other things I've done and looking at how countries have developed pyramids for the last 150 years. We have tons of evidence. And one of like almost every pyramid is built in a similar way over time, just naturally kind of happens. It seems to work best. And especially if you look at Japan, allows you to do it a little more quickly. And that is, and let's just take the professional tier of this pyramid. You have to start, well, you don't have to. I'm going to say you should start at the top. Like we'll call it Premier because I'm guessing that's what USL is probably going to call their top division based on their other nomenclature. So USL Premier, like you need to start with that league. And then what you do as that fills up, then you create the league that's going to be underneath it, which, again, using the same nomenclature is going to be the championship, and then it's going to be League One. The problem for USL right now is it has the championship. That kind of stood in isolation. They started to build the League One underneath it, which is exactly what you should do if your championship is your top one. But now they're going to try to put something above the championship. And I think that's because they're chasing professional league standards and they're chasing this name of having D1. And I think if you do that, you're going to shortchange your pyramid, especially over the short term. If you want to build your pyramid, which in turn is going to help strengthen your first division, they need to take what they have with championship and League One and just kind of shift those up into Premier and Championship and start filling in the League One underneath as they get teams to do that and not worry about. Again, this is another thing. I think the whole PLS standards, I think USL should argue pro is pro. All teams need to meet those Division 3 standards by US Soccer. And then they can be part of the pro division. And the USL needs to start then distinguishing what it means to be in the championship and what it means to be in the Premier. And those things will naturally evolve over time. I think if you make those too difficult right now, then you're going to get teams that are up in Division 1. You're not going to get very many teams in Division 2 that are going to be able to promote because they haven't met the requirements yet, which means you're not going to get effective promotion relegation. You're going to thin out what you already have in Championship and League One, and you just don't get that effective promotion relegation starting. I think even if they go national, like they could easily have a top tier and a second tier, depending how many teams you want to start with. And you could even start developing that third tier and start doing your promotion relegation right away and phase in what are ultimately going to be the Division 1 requirements. So people have a set date. Maybe it's by 2030, maybe it's by 2035. But USL then is already working promotion relegation for as many tiers as they want to create. But slowly over time, they're getting their top clubs to meet whatever first division standards are. I don't even think they need to meet those really practically. I think over time, if you do your pyramid right, that will take care of itself at the top. And you won't have any problems meeting a high level, but it also immediately allows people to promote and relegate, and it gives almost the baby steps in between the levels, and it's not this gigantic jump and a gigantic artificial jump. Because if you want to stay in the top division, you're going to have to innovate and do things well to remain in whatever the top division is. But I don't see USL doing that. I think they're going to bring in new teams. They'll promote some from the championship. They're going to dilute the championship down. They'll dilute League One. And I don't see promotion relegation being very successful for 15 or 20 years if they do it that way.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's going to take a while no matter what. But yeah, working from the top down doesn't really seem to have worked. But it's where the money is. So it does seem, to some extent, there's got to be some compromise, right? But how much is too much?
I mean, you can still do the top down. I mean, we saw that work with Japan. It's just that, you know,
Yeah,
your
but that's a different
you
top
you
down than what we're talking about here, right? Like,
you make your League One. Well, right. So I think they're setting the bar way too high for whatever their first division is for right now. For where teams are now, like at best, they should set it at championship standards and phase in League One standards over time. I mean, USL already kind of did this. The whole league was Division Three, and then the whole league promoted up to Division Two. They were all the same teams, but they increased their standards over time, right? They did, but I think they need to do that same thing. They just need to take what they have right now, just change the names. And it shouldn't be 24 teams, which is what they have in USL Championship. So there is going to be something where they separate those teams, but I would separate those teams on merit, not on other things, and have that progressive timeline of standards they need to meet. And if over a 5-year period you don't meet it, you're going to end up being, forced to relegate.
right.
And frankly, if you're not meeting it, there's another team coming up behind you that is going to meet it, and that really isn't going to be an issue if you set up your promotion and relegation pyramid properly. And I really don't think that is their priority. I think League One is their priority, and I think promotion relegation is kind of their cool little differentiator that I'm not sure will be successful if they go this route.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that. We'll see. I hope we're wrong.
Yeah, I'd like to see it be successful, and I think USL has to make that decision. But that's it. And I have some concerns from some of the things I read in a CBS article I read. They were talking about reverse parachute payments, basically subsidizing teams who are in the first division to be able to meet first division standards based on our current PLS, which I think is ludicrous. Like, that doesn't go away when you start subsidizing, and then now you're going to take money away unless you're helping get 15,000 seat stadia. I mean, that could be something that the league might help with, but the league already does kind of help do those partnerships and get into a community. But the whole idea of reverse parachute payments for teams that get promoted seemed ridiculous. If you need that, you're not ready to be promoted,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
The other thing that McDonough at the USL talked about Americans' predilection for playoffs, and how we got to have it, but we still have to have like the implication was a big expansive kind of playoffs, which again I think is like, stop trying to do things differently than the rest of the world. And this idea, like North Carolina, like buying its way right back into the first division after a couple of years. I think that's, if you're going to do promotion or relegation, start doing it. Take the teams you have, make a top tier, make a second tier, start bringing in teams underneath that, and use your pre-professional at the same time to start building out that base, and then promote in there.
Yeah, and I think too, within the first few years of your promotion relegation structure, you have teams buying into the top and being financially relegated out of the top. It's going to undermine the legitimacy of that structure for a very long time, and it'll be hard to
Yeah,
shake that perception.
right. That's why, to me, figure out, even if they're going to go a national table, they're going to go 20 teams, then figure out who your start. I mean, I wish they would start as soon as next year, but they won't. But the year after, if they're going to do it, then start with whatever your top division is and how many teams you want to have in there. And it's naturally going to get better over time. We see that in every pyramid, right? Money starts coming in, teams innovate, certain teams invest more, others don't. You start getting the better ones rise to the top, the ones that aren't, you know, go down a level. That will take care of itself if you do your pyramid right. So I mean, obviously my big wish, I would love to see the independent regional pyramids tied together with like a Champions League format. I think that helps manage what you're trying to do and not try to do a national footprint with national travel with every team all the time. I would love for USL to adopt a 50+1 ownership model to really tie to your communities, but you know, not
One
sure
thing at
that's
a time, John. One thing at a time.
anywhere on the pyramid. But I also think if USL knows exactly where they're going, which maybe they do, and they have that plan, I wish they would announce it, let everybody know what the plan is, where they intend to move forward, how teams can be a part of it, and just like throw the barn doors open and start figuring out which teams. Like, I may be an owner of a team who's like, well, I'm not going to be professional in the next 5 years, but in 10 or 15, I want to be there. And then those teams can start, finding their right place within the structure to start competing with similar teams, start moving up on merit, start doing the investment that they need to do. But also, I mean, I don't see how USL can do because normally your federation helps run your pyramid. I don't
Right.
see how the USL can do everything top to bottom. And this is where I think if they had a plan and they announced it and said, hey, UPSL, hey, APSL, like whoever you are, how can we work together so you can help fill this need in the bigger picture? And, we'll accept your teams that get promoted up. And again, that works, I think, better if you have independent regional pyramids rather than a national pyramid, because otherwise you can get heavy in one region somewhere, at one level, heavy on one side of the country at one level and heavy at the other side of the country at another level. So anyway, those are some of the things that I think I think the USL should consider, but my single biggest thing, if I had to put one, is I think they need to take the teams that they already have, whatever year they're going to start, and identify a top league and identify a league below. Change the names if you want. We've seen that around the world when the Premier League started, right? All of a sudden the names changed of the other leagues around. What was the first division is no longer the first division because now all the teams bumped up to the Premier League. But again, if we look at the Premier League without just seeing what happened at the top, the ripple effect of what happened down below was very challenging, right? And you're moving a whole bunch of teams out of the normal ecosystem and putting them up top, and now there's all these gaps that you have to fill. That really disrupted their pyramid for a while. To get back in order, because you just made something new. I feel like that's what's going to happen if they try to create a new Division 1 just out of the blue. But
Yeah,
I could be totally wrong, and it'll all be a smashing success, and we'll all be super happy in a couple of years with a first division and promotion and relegation and 60 professional teams across 3 divisions. Maybe.
Well, fingers crossed. But yeah, I think the decisions being made are a little bit too business focused and not enough football focused. But that's a pretty common complaint, I suppose.
Right. And I think they're missing out on the competition focus when really it's going to be the competition, the local rivalries, the connecting with your community. Those are the things that are ultimately going to make it successful. Right. This is the whole reason why I think North Carolina, well, not the whole reason, But North Carolina as a club, the ownership of the club, by what I see from the outside, all the way on the other coast, doesn't appear to be a ownership group and club that connects with its community like, say, Portland Hearts of Pine does. Right? I feel like Portland Hearts of Pine could go up or down, and that place is going to be packed with the community and the people who are going to be part, because they've done that good job connecting with their community. And I think if North Carolina had done similar things, then it would be a super easy drop down, like if you're having financial trouble, drop down to League One, self relegate, and work on what you need to work on. But if you can't handle the championship now, how are you going to handle League One in 2 years?
Yeah, and that's supposed to be the idea, right? It's not even self-relegating. You'll get relegated because your financial situation is such that your playing staff is one that isn't good enough for the league, and that is ideally where you want the system to be. But yeah, like I said, if the league puts themselves in a situation where it looks like they will, that they're going to be financially promoting and relegating clubs a bunch the first few years, it's going to be hard to take that very seriously.
Right. And then who's, if someone drops on merit, but they're a more financially stable club than someone gets promoted, I could see an owner like, well, this doesn't make any sense. We should still be up there.
Right. Yeah.
Because if that still needs to be there. You have to have, and we see it around the world. Like you have to meet requirements to be in the Premier League or the Championship or League One or League Two. You can't just be promoted on merit. Right? Every pyramid system has that, and USL should have that as well. But you're right. If they do it on finances right off the bat and it's not on merit, then that puts your entire pyramid on shaky ground as you start trying to move to a merit-based system. I think you start with your merit-based system right off the bat.
I agree, but unfortunately, I get the feeling it won't be that.
No, probably not. All right. That's I think pretty much wraps up what we have for this episode. Dylan, you have any last comments on this topic before we wrap up the show?
Not particularly. I think I've said more or less what I have to say.
Okay.
I think USL needs to lean more into what makes them different. I know that they do that to an extent, but I think they need to go all in on that.
Yeah, I agree. I hope they do. Really hard to know because they haven't announced what their plan is.
Right.
So really, really hope they work that part out. All right, Dylan, as we wrap up the show and we look ahead to the next week, what are your soccer plans, if any, for the week here?
Well, like I said, I'm going to keep my eyes open for the next round of the Open Cup qualifying. Other than that, I'll try and keep up with the San Diego teams in the playoffs this weekend. Spurs are 4:30 a.m. I don't know. I ran into Rodney, who's one of the main bartenders of Bluefoot today, and he told me he'll be opening the bar at 4:30 a.m. on Saturday, but I don't know. We'll see about that.
All right. Maybe an early weekend for you.
Yes.
Early Saturday.
Yes, we'll see about that.
Yeah, I will probably doing similar, keeping up on the playoff matches as we get into this weekend. And very much looking forward to figuring out when and where that round 4 match will take place and who the actual opponent will be, especially if it's not Laguna United, but I don't see how it can't be. I'm 99% certain.
I think it is.
Yeah, I just because the way they tried to do it regionally, I think I don't remember seeing anything to define the teams that were in a particular region, but I would imagine that would be the opponent. Okay, well, I guess that officially wraps up another episode of the LGS pod for us. If you have any questions or comments about tonight's show or anything you want to share about promotion, relegation, or Division 1 or USL, please drop us a note. You can leave a comment here on our YouTube channel. You can contact us at Blue Sky, which is at soccershorts.bigpinedigital.com. You can send us a text using the send us a text link at the top of the description if you're listening on one of the audio feeds for the podcast. Or if you have the time, join us at 6 o'clock on Tuesdays, which is when we usually do our live stream, and come join us for part of the conversation. All right, Dylan, before we head out, any final comments that you have?
Sure. Dick Cheney died today. And as they say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
And there's a nothing at all. Okay. Thank you, Dylan. And I'm sure we will both be checking in on the election results here this evening. But other than that, everyone, thank you for joining us on another episode of Local Grassroots Stories. And we hope to see everyone back next week. Good night.